What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel and thanks for watching. We got us a good little project here in the garage, and it's going to be kind of a doozy to get this one back on the road. So we are looking at a 97 Sportster 883. Sportsters are neat bikes. They really are a good project to get if you're looking for something on a budget, but this one has just been ridden hard. I'm not surprised. This actually would probably be a good bike to use as a donor project for a small chopper, but we are actually going to try to get this bike back on the road for a very small amount of money and do whatever we can to actually clean it up. So we're going to kind of break this video up into a few different parts, both the tear down, cleaning it up, and then just getting it back together. But we're just going to kind of go through now, just kind of give you guys a walk around of what we're dealing with, because she's rough. I mean, she looks a lot worse than she does on camera, I guarantee you that. But there are some serious problems. So high level, it is an 883. It actually feels like it might have had some motor work in the past. I've ridden many 883s, and this one, even as bad as the carb is running, which is something that will obviously come off and reworked, but as bad as the carb was running, it actually pulled pretty solid. Just getting it up the hill, I had to, if that makes sense, to get it out of the person's garage. But this bike has high miles. It is upwards close to 50,000, which is a lot of miles for a motorcycle, but we're going to still try to get it going good. And it has been on its side. So you can see there's a nice little factory dent right there. That's perfectly fine. That's all normal. You can see they dropped it on the turn signal, which is completely okay. They scuffed up the rear shock. It actually has air shocks on it, which is funny. But we're going to just kind of go in here and remove things we don't need, such as the signals. We're going to remove highway and passenger foot peg mounts that are not needed. There's actually a highway peg mount on the other side. I know a lot of you say, oh, it needs turn signals. Remember, we're trying to do this as budget as possible. We want to make this just like a little rat bike that we can get it back on the road. I don't really know what the heck this is. That probably weighs about as much as a 2x4. It's perfectly fine. This, ironically, was held on with some bungees that I failed to notice, but we'll figure out a way to get that attached. Most of the lighting does work. No, notice I said most of the lighting. The rear light does not work correctly, so we'll have to chase that electrical gremlin. What else we got? The pipes, honestly, are not that bad. The heat shields got a little rust on them, but I expected those to be beat up much worse. So we're going to leave those as they are. The motor is absolutely filthy, but these satin motors, unlike the black ones, if you know the black and chrome motors on the Evos and then some of the other 1200 Sportsters and so forth, they flake. You know what I'm talking about, the black paint flakes off. These, I think I can clean this up pretty good. There's going to be some rust, but that's, again, you're talking about a budget, cheapo bike. Here's where the problem comes in. When this bike was dumped, and I mean, it must have been dumped hard, it tweaked one of the fork legs. You can almost see it in the video, but the far side fork tube is bent. But we're going to replace those fork tubes. They are not that difficult to replace. But first, we will get it on a lift and just make sure that it indeed is just the tubes and there's nothing else wrong with it. And of course, the owner said, oh, they were fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Fine must be different definition for them. But anyway, we're going to delete these, weight reduction, because I'm not going to fix the other one. That's a waste of time and money, in my opinion. The tank, we are going to remove the tank so we can clean underneath it. That's going to be step one. I'm not going to fix the tank. We're just going to polish it and leave it. We're going to lipstick on a Pigot. And what else over here? Not much on this side. We will check through all the brakes. The brakes actually do seem to work pretty good, but the brake fittings are rusted, so we'll inspect those. Surprisingly, there's no leaks on this motor. That's why I kind of suspect, guys, that somebody's been in this motor before. No rocker box leaks, no base gasket leaks, which is good. Nice and rusty battery cover, that's fine. Steel wool that to death. And we are going to remove the rear wheels and rear shocks and everything. We're going to clean the snot out of it. And you can see these foot peg mounts. We'll just delete those, weight reduction. But she will be a fun project. And then a few other things. Oh yeah, this is exciting. So the throttle cable, they actually said you could drive this home, which was funny. But the throttle cable is so loose, it doesn't even hardly work. The idle cable itself is actually just missing off the bike. There's nothing in there. So we're going to replace those. Basically, we're going to replace fuel lines, any kind of lines that need to be replaced, anything safety-wise, brakes. I don't know if you can see there, but I can zoom in without hitting the phone. Hard to tell, but all the lines are just corroded. I mean, look at this. I mean, that's fine, right? That's perfectly factory. That vent line, just disgusting. But we're going to pull that off and replace all that. And then the pipes, I was going to pull the pipes completely, but I'm afraid, because if you get up in here, I don't think the phone's going to show it. No, it's not. Those head bolts up in there are super rusty. I do not want to snap off a stud. So we're just going to pull these slip-ons, these mufflers off, pull these heat shields so I can get a jack underneath it and lift it up and just leave this on. Because I do not want to snap anything because this motor is so old. But that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to maybe replace the grips, and the foot pegs just need new rubber because that's pretty bad. That's disgusting, actually. So that's it. So again, she does run. She has not been taken care of. I mean, it has been, this thing has definitely been ridden hard and put up wet, not to have a cliche term, but that is definitely the truth. And we're just going to do whatever we can to get it back on the road pretty much. So anyway, we're going to get into it here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and start removing this tank first. And I didn't even see how much gas is in the tank. It's probably full, which would be terrific. Kind of hard to see on camera, but there is some in there. I might actually just pull this tank with the gas in it. The reason is, this is a 97 model, so this is a vacuum operated petcock, which sucks. Thank you, EPA, or whomever decided that back in the day. Meaning you can't just run a line from here to your gas tank and turn it on. You have to provide vacuum on the other line. But since we're not going to remove anything from the gas tank itself, I might just disconnect everything since it's not completely full and lift it up. I know that may not be to spec, but you know, I don't do anything to spec, so that doesn't matter. All right, well, let's get into it with the gas tank. Okay, guys, here's what we're dealing with this gas tank. Did a few things already here just because I didn't want to try to do this with the camera in my hand since I'm messing with gas. So, drop the fuel line here. Actually put this in there just to keep some of the smell out and all that. This was, by the way, one of the nastiest. I mean, that is horrible. That definitely needed to be replaced. Did check in the tank. I don't have that much gas to begin with, so there was not much that would come out, so that's good news. So no need to worry about that. But just to kind of show you some prep work over here on this side, if you look up in here, you can see I traced the vent line here. If I can get my hand on it. Now I can't. Of course, that's great after I told you that. Anyway, there's a vent line that comes up that plugs in these other lines. That is the line that you would use to create a vacuum. So in other words, if you put suction on that, because it takes suction from the intake, so in other words, the intake, the motor has to be cranking to pull that open to allow fuel to drain down. There's a diaphragm in there. And by the way, there is a way to bypass those in those factory petcocks if anybody's interested. But that's where we would provide vacuum. I'm not going to screw with it because there's not that much gas left in this tank. So all we need to do now is get bolts here and here loose. And of course, I'm sure a lot of that rubber is going to drain out. This one right here is just going to literally fall off. Yep, see, just like that. That is awful. We'll have to find that and replace it. But yeah, just remove those and get this tank off. I do have a shop manual, but I think we can figure this out for the most part. So we got the vent line back there removed. We've got the vacuum petcock line removed. We've got the fuel line itself removed from the petcock, and now we just need to remove the bolts. Now, one side of these does have an Allen head, and the other side has a 1/2 inch socket. So we're just going to let that kind of hang like that for now that it's loose. Now this side over here is kind of hidden. There we go. Broke loose, thank goodness. Well, I'll say that, right? Spoke too soon. There we go. And we'll go ahead and get this back one pretty much out. All right, that nut is out on that side. And that bolt's out. Good. And that back end will lift right up. That is good. Okay guys, as you can see, we got the rear one out. It's now loose. And this one we just need to pop out. So I'm gonna get this phone back in the camera, I'm gonna get this phone back in the holder so I can get both hands on this sucker and pop that out, because as you can see, this is all gonna come with it. Oh, by the way, you gotta love this. This was that loose. It's terrific, that's fine. There's nothing like your ignition switch bouncing down the highway while you're riding. That's no big deal. But we're gonna kind of get this to where it sits down, and then we've got some blocks of wood over there to set it on, just so the petcock and everything can hang down, if that makes sense, just to give it space. Because this tank is flat underneath, and of course we'll clean it all up. And one thing, guys, I want to emphasize about this project, I know I'm kind of beating up on this bike, but the whole point is to show you can get some stuff like this running for pretty cheap. It won't win a show, but you can get it back on the road. But anyway, let's get this thing in position and get this tank off. As you can see, we got this front bolt out. This tank is she's just sitting on it. So what we're gonna do, please don't fall, that would not be good, is this should, in theory, lift up that we get. Yep, just like that. Look at that. Sweet. Let's go set this down. Wow, look at that. 51,000 miles in 26, 27 years, whatever, a lot. And of course, this tank might have been off. Like I said, it probably was off at some point for some motor work, but this is gonna allow us to really get in there and clean this sucker up. And just to show you the tank over here, that's all there is to it. It's sitting on some blocks. Just think about it, this bike was pretty much left for dead, but we're gonna get it back on the road. There's that line coming over, but we'll get some closer ups of the tank as we get closer on, as we get later on in this project. Let's get up in here. See, the nice thing now, guys, is we can get up in here and just scrub and clean and just really work on this thing. We're gonna remove all this right here. We're gonna basically strip it down to the motor, just the pipe portion. We're gonna take the mufflers off. Like I said, we're gonna block off anything else. It's a line. This will obviously have to be replaced and removed. We'll block this off, this vent line, and we're gonna scrub the snot out of this thing. Okay, well, that's a wrap for the gas tank. So we're probably gonna call it a night at this point, but we will get back very shortly. It'll be instant for you guys, and we're gonna start getting these pipes off. Okay, we're back. It's the next day. We're gonna start we're gonna start with the exhaust on this bike, and then hopefully we can get it up on the jack so we can actually roll this thing around and do some simple cleaning on it, or some deep cleaning on it. It's gonna be way more than simple. But here's kind of where we are. You can see a few things that we did do yesterday after we shut off the camera is just kind of got rid of the coil in the ignition area, tidied that up, just lifted the ignition up, just so we can clean the top on these rocker boxes and get in here good. May not be necessary, but for me, I like to really just go the extra mile to clean as much as possible. Another thing too, just to kind of note for those of you when you're working on something like this, if you're not used to it, or if you, dare I say, don't have a shop manual, because I don't. I look up shop manuals online. That's just how I do it. Hate me if you want. But just take your bolts and everything, put them back in where they were. Try to take pictures of stuff. Use your camera, use your phone. You have the technology, do it. It makes it very easy. But we've already done some little bit of pre-work here. Let me show you what we've got going on. So we're removing the heat shields. We are going to remove this one back here. But this just kind of gives us better access to it. And you can see, guys, on these heat shields, all they are is just hose clamps. I mean, literally, that's all they are. And that's what they still use to date. These are very just thin, simple metal. I'm actually surprised the shape these are in, so we're definitely going to save these. And another note too, just kind of a tip here, if I can point at it here with this. Here's the clamps for them. There's one for this heat shield on the rear pipe. And there's another one up under here. You can see it. When you put these on, even when you buy aftermarket pipes, make sure you can get to these. In other words, if you were tightening the heat shield clamp this way, and as you're tightening it, if it rotated around behind the pipe, you're going to have a hard time getting them loose. So make sure you can access them. I know sometimes you may not want to see them, but that could be a real massive pain when you're trying to remove them later. And on these pipes, as we said yesterday, we're not gonna mess with removing them because those studs are so rusted, I'm afraid they'll break. My initial idea on these pipes was actually to remove the heat shields if they were in bad shape, cut this center pipe off, weld a piece on here to cover it, which I could use this as a piece to weld, and then wrap them. But I don't think it's worth it, to be honest, just the condition of this bike. And again, I don't want to snap anything. So we're going to get this camera, or this phone camera, whatever you want to call it. We're going to get this back in the stand here, and we're going to start removing these mufflers. So then we can get this freaking bike up on a lift. And once we get it on the lift, we can start taking a lot of it off. It'll be pretty cool. All right, so for this rear muffler, one thing that is kind of a pain on these is you've got to get to this. It's a 3/4 inch nut that's back here that holds that on. I already did use some WD-40 to just kind of help with some of these clamps and bolts, but we need to lift this master cylindre up right here to get, because it's literally blocking it, which is annoying. But all you got to do is loosen it. There is a clamp right here that I already disconnected. It's just a simple little 5/16 inch bolt that holds that clamp on. It's in the way, but we're going to lift this up, remove this nut, remove this one down here, and in theory, this muffler should slide off. So let's go ahead and start with a master cylinder. And most everything on this bike has been, same thing here, has been pretty loose for the most part. I don't think, a lot of people talk about how you should always go through and check these bolts on these bikes, and they are not lying. They will get loose over time. All right. Let's see the best angle for it there. I think like this. There is no need for this to be too tight. Good. Boom. Perfect. Got that out of there. Not too bad. And this, I believe, 9/16. That was not tight at all. Oh, good. She's coming right on off. We can take this off after we remove. Look at that. All right, let's see if we can get this muffler off. Boom, look at that. Okay, well, that came off very easy. That has been the theme with this bike so far. I think everything, God, these are so freaking heavy. I would love to just put a set of just standard drag pipes on this bike and put some small mufflers, or what they call the washer trick. If you don't know what the washer trick is, make a comment below and I'll try to explain it. But these things are just so freaking heavy, but we're gonna keep them. We're gonna keep running them because they're what's on it. They sound decent, and we're trying to keep this budget friendly. So we're just gonna set that one there for now. This heat shield. And again, these are just clamps, and you have to remove them all the way. They gotta come apart, okay? Keep going. Keep it going. There we go. So both of them are disconnected. Just pop them off. That's it. So you can see here, all you do is just unfold them. When you put them back on, you just mash those in there and clamp them back on. It's that easy. And with these being off, we can clean the snot out of these. And there are some rust spots on them, but gosh, these heat shields are probably the best looking thing on this bike, so that's fine. I do think it would look better with the pipe wrap, but I don't think it's worth the hassle, if that makes sense, or the investment right now. So, and one thing, we will tidy this back up. So before we put the jack on, we're gonna go ahead and attach all this back up. All right, for this rear pipe, we've got, let's go ahead and loosen this one. This should be 9/16 as well. Golly. Now this one has got, there it is. I have to say, it should be all it needs. This one I have not sprayed anything in it yet. While we're loosening them, we're just gonna go ahead and, for good measure. Yep, not too bad. Now, here's the question. Will this one do what the other side did and come on off? Yes, it will. I'll be. Never would have thought this in a million years. Never would have thought this would be this easy, ever. But I have to believe it, I'm looking right at it. Look at that. Came right off after, goodness gracious, no telling how many miles and years. Okay, well, we got those off. I am extremely shocked those came off that easy. I just was not expecting that. So these are off. You can see that mount back there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the nuts back on there, tidy everything up so we can find it. We've got the clamps. Where's my clamps? Oh, here's one right here. Keep the clamps and the mufflers together. We're gonna take the master cylindre and put it back up. Have it tucked up out of the way. It's the way it's supposed to be. And then it does look like this pipe might get in the way of the jack a little bit. It's gonna be close, but I think we can put a board. If I can get the front end on that piece of the frame, I should be fine. Worst case, I'll put a piece of plywood or something underneath there to get that, because again, I do not want to have to break these loose up on those heads. Okay, well, we're in business now. She's got the jack, fellas. She's got, well, maybe not that kind of jack, but you get what I'm saying. We are now lifted up. Actually had plenty of clearance there. So we can now get started on these front and rear wheels, fork tubes, handlebarlage, all that good stuff. So did do a few things already off camera I want to kind of show. Number one, did remove the front fender. There's not much to that, but I went ahead and messed with this caliper, and the reason is it was hung up pretty good, and I had to spend quite a bit of time on it. I didn't want to bore everybody with it, but as you know, this front end was tweaked. It was crashed, not crashed, but it was dropped. And when it did, it hit right up here. As you can see, this beautification up here on the handlebars. And then it tweaked the wheel that way, and it hit the fender. And what it did is it literally twisted the front end in. So the fork tubes we know are going to have to be replaced, but it was lodged in to this caliper pretty dang good. And I had to use some motivation to get it out. So I've got this caliper kind of roped up, tied up, whatever you want to call it. I think I can save on it. It'll definitely need new pads. The pads look bad as it is, so we'll just go ahead and replace those. I'm going to try to get, in some of the off camera, I'm going to try to get something to press that back in, use a C-clamp, and see if I can't push that back out and give us some space and make sure it works. Worst thing, we hook it up. If it doesn't want to work right and something looks warped or broke, then we'll just replace it, because you have to. This, I didn't even look, honestly, to see. The rotor looks fine. I don't think anything, and then of course the wheel now functions. It rolls very smooth, because before it was just hung up, and that was the problem. So we're going to get this wheel off, and then we're going to work on getting this rear wheel off, which will be a little more involved, but everything in the back here should be fine. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on this front one. A few things to note on these front wheels, especially now that I've got the caliper off, is there is a pinch bolt right here on the bottom. We'll loosen that, or excuse me, no, we'll wait to loosen that. And first we'll loosen the main nut over here. These are tightened to about 50 to 55 foot-pounds, so shouldn't be much of an issue getting these off, but we will see. Everything on this bike so far has been very, very loose, but I will say the caliper bolts were not. So you can take that for what it is. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on this front wheel. All right, let's see what we got here. Let's see if this is even possible. Wouldn't surprise me if this is really lodged on here. Yeah, that is being a bit of a problem. Motivation. When in doubt, get a motivator. There we go. Woo! She was taut. Whoops. Run away. All right, real quick, back on this one. Just gonna loosen it all the way. Yep, there we go. We're just gonna try to tap this axle through. You see it's coming right out. That's a great sign. Of course, pay attention to all your washers like I did and let them fall on the ground. So now whenever you take this off, you're gonna have spacers that are gonna fall off on this side potentially. So what we wanna do is just pull this axle out, let this wheel slide down, and remember, or not remember, but keep in mind, the back end of the bike is gonna wanna settle a little bit just because of the weight. There we go. All good. Okay, so you can see we got the wheel off. And as I said, there is one spacer right there. And those spacers, in case you don't know, and there's another real tiny spacer in there. These spacers, if you don't know, what they do is the bearings are in there, obviously. And there's a tube inside, or I don't know the proper term for it, another spacer that's on the inside in between the bearings. And then these spacers basically pinch everything together. The 50 to 55 foot-pounds gives you the proper preload on those bearings. That's why this is where you do want to be careful on your torque specs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this axle back out. We're going to clean it up very good, inspect everything, clean up these spacers really good. See how those just push up against there. Put everything back together and just kind of tidy this wheel up and put it off to the side. Because unless we see anything wrong with this, we're going to put this sucker back on the way it was. All right, we're moving on to the rear wheel. Let's see what we got down here, folks. So this one, in theory, should not be have as many problems, even though it does have more things involved, because there was no, as far as I know, there was no wreckage back here. But you know what? People tend to hide stuff. And believe it or not, you know, talking about this caliper and all that up front, I was told I could drive this bike home, which I never would have done to begin with. And they lived on top of a mountain, so yeah, I would rather ride in a bathtub with caster wheels on it than drive this thing down it. But we're going to get it running good. So what we got here, we did have a cotter pin here. That's been removed. You're supposed to replace those, but that one we can probably reuse. Don't hate me on that. The adjusters, so there are axle adjusters that you have to let up first. Okay, so don't be intimidated by these when you read the book, the manual, or the shop manual. It'll freak you out a little bit, but all you're really doing is, you can see I marked these with a Sharpie. Hopefully that stays, but I also took a picture and counted the threads. So all I'm doing is just saying, hey, how many threads did I have here to begin with? How many threads did I have there to begin with? I'm putting the same wheel on, same belt, same everything, back on the bike when it's done. I'm doing this just to clean it good. So in theory, I should be able to go right back to where I was, tighten the axle nut, and we should be straight. And then once you get it going, you want to rotate this nice and good and make sure this belt is tracking straight. That's all you're doing. There is no need to overcomplicate this. There are other things you can do. I will probably also take, and you can mark the center of the, that's the shock mount. Mark the center of the axle nut here and measure from front to back, measure from here to the center point of this, if I can point right with the camera, to the center point of the swing arm, just to kind of align it. That's all you're doing. Just think basic geometry or measurements or whatever. So, but that's what we're going to do. So we are going to go ahead and loosen on these axle adjusters, and then we're going to use the Axle Loosener 5000 AK, the Hobo Freight jack handle, to get this sucker loose, because I do not feel like breaking my back on that, and there's no need to do that. Okay, and these shouldn't be very tight. No, they're not. So all we're going to do when we loosen this axle nut is this is just all going to kind of slide in, if that makes sense. That's all it's going to do. Because you want it to do that. So you take tension off that belt or chain if you're on a chain drive. Same thing over here. If I got clearance, do I? Do I have clearance? Yes, I do. And guys, if you notice, I'm just using some real basic tools. I don't have any matching set tools. I mean, look at this. Using adapters, you can do this with anything. Okay, so we're going to use this handle and see if we can get this sucker loose. Look at that. Oh, easy. Leverage, I'm telling you. Don't fight it. Put a pipe or something on the ratchet. Look at that. That's it. We are good to go. I just had to kick it forward a little bit. A little motivation there. So it is now released. This caliper bracket actually slides along the swing arm. So now we are fully loosened. And as you can see here, just like on the front, just gonna pound it through. That's it. Now, this one's a lot heavier and, well, it's a little heavier, not a lot. And you've also got the belt to worry about. So we're gonna just try to lower down and probably have to roll this thing forward. I'm just putting the boards here just to keep it from falling so far. And just kind of have to slip the belt off. All right. That's fine. 2 spacers, that's okay. So we are cleared here. Now the question is, can I get this belt off? This is always the problemo. Yep, there we go. And at the same time, fishing it out of that swing arm, or excuse me, the caliper. And you know what? I need to get rid of this here. That was not a smart idea. We'll just delete on that. We'll keep this one over here. All right. Now the belt is clear. It is completely off. I gotta see what I'm hitting on here. It's just rubbing on the caliper bracket a little bit. Okay. We are good. I might, I think I'm gonna have to maybe jack this bike up just a little bit more. Okay, we are going to try to do this live. All right, this bike has gotten much lighter, which is good. So we're going to give ourselves a little more space. Take this take this bike up a lot higher than I wanted to. She's good. We got a lot of weight off of it, so the bike is very stable. Is that enough? No, it's not. Let's just keep going. Do this the right way. Don't fall on me. Good Lord. Good heavens. I wouldn't want to scratch it. Look at that. Boom. There we go. We are good. We got all that loosened, removed. We can really get up in here. I was going to remove the shocks, but I'm not going to do that. There's no reason to do it. And that kind of breaks my rule of let's don't get too cutesy with it because you might just be causing yourself a headache. Everything on the back here seems fine. I will inspect the calipers later to see if they need new pads. They probably do if the fronts do, but you know, about 70–80% of your braking's in the front anyway, so they might be okay. Remember, we're trying to be all budget on this, but it is now stripped down to about as far as we're gonna get it today. Probably what I will do is go ahead and delete on some of these peg mounts and stuff like that. I might remove that sissy bar. I'm definitely going to remove this garbage on the back. I don't know what's going on there, but we do need to remove the handlebars because we're going to repaint those. We're going to, you know, rattle can them, official powder coat, and we need to be able to get to these top caps because all I have is a socket for this. I don't have a wrench, so I need to be able to get straight down because we need to remove these out completely. Okay, well, we're gonna tidy these wheels up a little bit and we will catch you guys in just a moment. Alrighty, we have these wheels off and tidied up. We're gonna try to get a few more things done up here on these handlebar bars in a minute. I can't talk, whatever. It's been a long day. Bear with me. But taking a look at these wheels, one thing to note is when you remove these, sorry for the sun, that's like horrible lighting, you're gonna have different axle spacers and so forth. Just pay attention to what side they come off of and just kind of tidy them up. I already brake cleaned these really good, oiled them up or greased them up really good and put them back in there. I even scrubbed them up with some of the Simple Green, believe it or not, to make them look a little decent. But they're pretty much ready to go on. And the other one's over there ready to go. But what we're looking at now, this is kind of the easy parts, as I call it, getting some of these controls off. I did go ahead and remove the brake caliper along with the handlebar control. I stored it over there. You can see underneath the truck is a great place for storage. That's perfectly fine. But we're going to work on these. So here's something funny to note on these controls. So for those of you that know these CV carbs, know that right over here is, if I can get my hand on it, is the accelerator pump. Well, when I was running it, I noticed that hitting the throttle didn't really do much of anything. You just had ease on it. And when I pulled this, I just got that in there, you know, for whatever reason. When I would hit the throttle earlier, it wasn't squirting nothing. Somebody, if you can see it, actually left the arm. Can't make this up. Actually left the L-shaped, you know, metal piece off that runs the accelerator pump. It's literally missing. So that's terrific. But that'll be another add to the buy list. But we will be getting the carb off after we clean it. We're going to clean this thing really good tomorrow. But what we're going to do first is just get these cables off, get everything off this bar. You can see this is just about gone because we already took the brake master cylindre off and all that. But this side's also interesting. So the clutch, which is normally pretty simple, you loosen her up and you can pop it out. We'll pop the switches off and all that. But I don't know. I don't think you guys can see it on camera. Let's see if I can get a better angle of it. It was so rusted and so disgusting that it was literally soaking wet. I barely got this broke loose. I have never, ever seen a clutch adjuster, there's a better picture of it, that bad. That was insanity. It was literally soaking wet. We sprayed plenty of WD-40 on it and all that and broke it loose. I'm going to have to remove it from up top first to untwist it some. The clutch still worked great, so I'm not concerned about that. But remember, this is a budget. We just want to get it back on the road. I'm not going to go in and start replacing everything unless it's absolutely necessary. So let's get started on this part first. All we're going to do here is just, there's really no sense in even caring about these because these are all going to be replaced. These just pop out. If you're on the, I think it's 96 and up Harleys, these just literally pop out of the bottom. There are these little brass fittings that are in there. I'm going to save on these just in case I need them. I'll put them in my pocket and probably forget, so that's fine. Those just pop out just like that. That's the idle one that's literally not even exiting at the bottom, like it's broke, so it's there for nothing. And then here's the actual throttle side. Pulled it out. Take that brass fitting off. You don't want to talk about the brass fitting. It's this little doodad or whatever right there. We're going to pop this one off, and then we can just, okay, yeah, just be a pain. That's right. Don't even work. That's fine. Don't even work for me. We'll just pull that off the carburetor here later. And then these switch housings just come off like this. I actually got one of these loose, which is pretty remarkable. Let's see if we can do the same there without breaking it. Nope, broke it. That's fine. So we'll just do ye old zip ties on it, on that one. We'll just leave it on there for now. And then here's the grip, which is absolutely disgusting. So we are probably going to replace these grips. I know we're trying to be budget, but having nicer grips that aren't literally caked on disgustingness. I mean, even some of that chrome is flaking off and it'll tear into your hand. But I don't know. That just seems, it would work. So that's one side. Again, we're going to get these bars off. Now for this one, we're just going to loosen her up. Loosen. Come on now. Don't, why do you have to be a pain? Don't do this to me. Not now. Not now. Come on. There we go. I don't know why that has to be so tight. Somebody had to use the power of Grayskull to put this on, I guess, because they were afraid, you know. Let's don't tighten up anything else like the exhaust, but let's make sure the switch housing doesn't fly off. That's important, even though half the freaking switches don't even work. Oh, and that one's fine. Well, it's because I loosened the top one. Put those in my pocket too, so I lose them. Perfect. No, I don't have any fancy sockets or nothing when I do this. You just do with what you got, folks. and it'll work perfectly fine. Oh, and that grip is glued on. I was hoping that was one that was locked in, which means, crap, I'm going to probably have to get a, a little disc wheel on there to just fillet that thing open. Now for the main event, let's see if we can loosen this. Let's see if they He-Man this on as well. Oh, not as bad. Good. Some intelligence prevailed. I'm impressed. Oh, I almost spoke too soon. Okay. So hopefully when we get this off here, this cable will untwist. Because you can tell she's wanting to she's wanting to go everywhere. Easy, easy. I've never, ever, 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 did I say ever? Seen a cable do that before. That rusted that bad. This thing was clearly part. And actually on top of these switch housings, they're just like sandpaper almost. They're just flat black, which means this thing was probably sitting under a tarp for many years, which is kind of a shame, but hey, at least somebody was using it. They ran the snot out of it, so it's not like it just sat there with no miles. So it was probably somebody's only way to get to work or something. So you gotta respect that. Okay, so whoa, oh yeah. Okay, so what we got to do here, if I can get the light betterage, is we need to just adjust this in, which we should be able to do now that this is disconnected. So I can disconnect it from that lever. I mean, in theory, I could leave it hanging down like that. That's fine, but I don't want to do that because I also want to get some cable lube down in there pronto because this thing is just, it's bad. But again, the clutch works just fine and it's actually pretty smooth. So I think it's just here on the surface right there. Let's see. We should be able to turn this. Can I turn this in? I'm being way too. Well, it actually is working a little bit. We just need to shorten it up. That's all we're doing. I've never, ever had to do this like this before. If any of you guys have seen this, feel free to make a comment because this is absurd. I've never seen one this bad. So you can see here, what happens is now that I loosened it, I can pop that out just like this. And then I can pop this little, whatever you want to call it, plasticky, whatever thing, and boom, it's out. So that's all it does. So we will take this cable, we'll take this cable and just attach it up here, literally just leave it going straight up from the bike. We'll cover that monstrosity back up. And then I'll get some cable lube or oil down in there to just kind of help it just kind of soak down in there really good because this thing is an absolute mess. But now our switch housing will come off just like the other one. If I can do that on camera here. Yep. This will all come out. I can one-hand this probably. Oh, that felt fine. And we'll just do the other one and then just literally pop these bars off. Now, one thing we will do or will not do is the tubes are going to stay in for now. And the reason is I need the tubes inside the triple trees here to get these top caps off. But of course, you can't loosen these top caps with them out. I mean, I guess you could if you put them in a vise or something like that because we're going to replace them. So we're just going to leave the tubes on and go ahead and wash the lower legs really good, or the sliders, whatever you want to call them. I call them the lowers. And clean all that up good. But we're going to take these bars off and then anything else off. All the little brackets to delete. We'll get rid of them throttle cables along with the idle cable. And this funness, I keep ignoring this. Get that junk off of there. And it's pretty much, folks, that's what we're going to do. We're going to pretty much just clean it as is like this. Sorry, I know the lighting is bad in here, but whatever. What's up, guys? We're going to start the cleanup on this bike now. We're outside and we've got it out here on the lift, and we're just going to kind of walk you through the process here in our current situation. So as you can see, we're outside. The bike is up on the lift, which is great. Makes it so handy for a bike this old. Now, I wouldn't normally do this to a nicer bike. The process that I use for cleaning is the same. I'll show you, but not to the extent of this one. There's some things I will do on this bike that I would not do on certain wheels, certain pieces of metal, etc. on a nicer bike. But this thing is just so filthy. I mean, it's really hard to see. I will cover this up, the electrical, the seat. You can see I got the intake covered up with a baggie, but I mean, it really wouldn't have hurt it anyway. This thing's I don't know, that thing's a cheap piece of junk, but we're going to leave that on there anyway. But it really makes it handy if you want to do it, in my opinion, if you want to do it right. We'll call this kind of a budget semi-restore. I mean, it's not fully restored, obviously, but there's going to be some things we just can't do. But yeah, we're going to do that. So the process I use is very simple, ironically. We'll use some complicated green that is diluted, a water hose, and then we're going to scrub this one. Now, no, I would never use this on a nice bike, so nobody freak out. I'm not using this on the paint either. This will be the frame, fins, and so forth. But I do use simple green on even nice bikes, on the bikes I own. You just got to be careful what you put it on. And then after that, you can wash it, and then I usually blow dry it off with a leaf blower. But on this one, we're just going to scrub, and then we're going to take it inside. From there, we can start removing things such as the carburetor that needs to come off because it's got multiple problems going on with it. And then we'll start taking these front legs, these lowers, these sliders, I think that's the proper term, off of these fork tubes and start getting all that ready. And then, of course, we'll be waiting on parts to show up. But we are going to get to it, see if there's anything else I'm missing I want to share with you guys. But yeah, it's just a matter of scrubbing, and we'll see where it gets. So when we are done out here scrubbing, I will get this thing back in the garage and do a walk around and just kind of show you. It's probably going to be hard to see it on camera, as is with most things, but we will update you nonetheless. Step one of cleaning done. So we scrubbed it quite a bit. There's still a lot of places we have to get to down in there at the bottom of those push rod tubes. This is where I wish I could take these pipes off, but it's just not worth the risk. But we will literally get in there with a rag and simple green and just scrub. We'll be taking the carburetor off tonight. I'm not going to do much videoing of the carburetor just because this is going to be, if not, we would end up with such a huge video here. But I will update you guys on what we ended up doing as far as the carburetor goes, because I'm sure there's going to be some mysteries inside that thing. But you can just see here, it's just been cleaned for the most part. I know the lighting in here stinks, so bear with me. And then here on the frame, there is surface rust, pretty bad surface rust in my opinion. There's nothing down in the metal. The frame is fine. So we're going to wire wheel that up and just do a little spray painting on that. Just block it off with cardboard. Just do a little Rust-Oleum restore, if you know what I mean. Just to kind of keep it from flaking anymore. You can tell this bike has not only sat outside, but it has sat outside getting rained on multiple times, which is, normal, I guess, if it sits out. But it has just been neglected. Hopefully, we can get this bike back on the road, and it'll make a cool little around town ride, if you know what I mean. And this bike was just left for dead, guys. I really think this thing the motor would have been ripped out and sold, which is fine. That's where most of the money is on this thing. But it'd be really cool to see this thing back out on the road again for minimal dollars. But it has definitely come a long way. And then the tubes, if you remember this slider was pretty nasty. We still got some more cleaning to do on it. But we will get on part 2 whenever we get into that of this video, because we're gonna end it here because we have a lot of parts to get to. And I'm not going to bore you guys with just all the cleaning. It's just a lot of elbow grease. But on part 2 of this, we are going to start with doing the new fork legs, and from there getting the carburetor on and just getting her back together pretty much, and hopefully with minimal cost. Well, guys, this is going to wrap up part 1 of this project. So far, it's been kind of a doozy for me. Wasn't expecting it to be this involved, but I think that's pretty normal with things like this. But hey, that makes it part of the fun. Let me know what you think about in the comments below. Be interested to hear the feedback. Also, if you can, please subscribe. We're going to start working on part 2. I cannot wait to see this thing get cleaned up and get started up and get back on the road after it was just left for dead. But until then, we'll talk to you next time.